Hi, welcome to day 10 of the What's the Stitch campaign, and happy Halloween to everybody. Today I am wearing my white button-up shirt, my jeans, my short black boots, and my brown coat again. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can dispose of clothing that you no longer want in ways that are a little better for the planet than just throwing something away. First, a little bit of statistics about how much textile ends up in landfill every year. So less than 1% of the material used to make clothing is recycled to make new clothing every year. So it's a very, very small amount of textile that is actually recycled and reused within the industry. And that is a loss of more than $100 billion of material every year. 87% of that material ends up in landfill or is incinerated, so that has huge negative environmental impacts. And the estimate by a report that came out this year, that is by the, I believe it's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, is that the fashion industry will make up 1/4 of the world's carbon budget by 2050 if they continue at the pace that they are at. So it's important to learn to reuse textiles much more than we are right now. So one of the first things that you can do rather than throwing clothing away is to donate it, and I think this is the most common thing that people do, and it's very well intentioned, but it is not as effective as we would like it to be. 84% of the clothing that is donated ends up in landfill anyway, because it's really just prolonging the life of that clothing, prolonging it from going to trash and pushing it off onto other countries. The biggest importers of secondhand clothes are Pakistan and Malaysia, Pakistan taking in 11% of the industry. So it is basically a way for us to prolong the life of our clothing, so it's better than throwing something directly in the trash. There's a chance that somebody will pick it up from a secondhand store and reuse that textile, but there's also a much larger chance that it's just going to end up in the trash as if you had just thrown it away yourself, except that it'll end up in the landfills of much poorer countries than, say, the US or the UK. So that is something to consider when you're donating something, but it is certainly a step that can be taken rather than just throwing something in the trash. The next thing that you can try to do with clothing is recycling it. This is really a developing possibility. We don't necessarily have all the technologies developed yet to reuse some textiles, but there are more and more options for this emerging. So I really encourage you to do a little research, go on to Google and look a bit for the options for recycling clothing in your area. Some companies are getting involved. I mentioned Mud Jeans in my video a few days ago about my favorite sustainable brands. They recycle denim into new jeans. Patagonia is a sustainable company and they recycle their clothing if you give it back to them. And even some fast fashion brands like H&M and Zara, especially in the UK, versions of those stores are starting to do a lot more clothing recycling if you bring it in. And there are some incentives involved in that, like 15% off more clothing, which you might argue defeats the purpose because it means consuming more textiles when you're giving back textiles, but those are some options to consider where your textiles might be reused if you're looking to get rid of them. And again, you can look for local options. There's a company called US Again, which has clothing bins around, I believe, 16 different cities now in the United States, and they try to sustainably recycle clothing. So you can keep an eye out for those bins. I know that we have some at my university, and organizations often sponsor to have them, so if you are a university student, it might be worth asking your university to get some of those bins if you don't already have them. So that's another option for potentially recycling clothing, and that is, again, an expanding technology that hopefully in the next few years it will be much more feasible to give clothing back to companies so that they can reuse the fabric itself or shred it up and create new fabric rather than using brand new materials. So the next option is to either resell or give away your clothing. If it's something that you're not going to be using anymore, reselling or giving your clothing away at least means that you know it's going to somebody else who could potentially use it. So if you're going to do clothing swaps with your friends, or if your friends liked a piece of clothing and you're not going to wear it anymore, giving that away to them or giving hand-me-downs to your siblings is a great way to know that that piece of clothing is getting at least one more use out of it from one more person. They're not going to go buy something else because they got a new piece of clothing from you. And then reselling your clothing is another option, which can also involve making a little bit of money, which can help you maybe reinvest in a more sustainable wardrobe. Some shops, a lot of you probably heard of Poshmark, which is where you list your clothing, and then when people buy it, you package it up and they send you the shipping label and you can send it off to people. I think that has the most potential for financial gain, but it can be a lot more work intensive. I personally thought about doing it and realized I did not have the time to photograph and try to sell my clothing in that very item by item way. So something that I've used before is a site called ThreadUp, and they will send you a cleanup kit for free. It's basically a bag, a very sturdy bag that you can seal up with a shipping label on it and send back, and you can fill it with shoes, accessories, clothing, and send it back to them. And you don't get tons of money from doing that, but you get some, especially from higher end labels. But it is a nice way to get rid of stuff, because they will, if it's good enough quality stuff, they will take it and resell it, so you know somebody's using it again, and you can see on the websites which items have resold, and they guarantee that anything that is not resold they will reuse or recycle in a sustainable way. So that is a great company and a great one to use if you don't necessarily have the time to sell each item individually. And then one final thing you can try to do if reselling isn't really an option, something is maybe like an old t-shirt or something like that that isn't really something that would get picked up in a thrift store or isn't something anyone would want to buy online, you can try to repurpose your clothing. So for example, old t-shirts can be used as maybe rags if you chop them up, so that you don't have to use as many paper towels to clean things. So that can be a sustainable option in multiple ways. Or something I've done in the past is taking old jeans and kind of patchworking them together into reusable grocery bags. And I don't have any of mine with me anymore, but that is a great option because jeans are such a sturdy material, and they're something that doesn't biodegrade very quickly in landfills. So it's great to reuse that material rather than throwing it away. So those are just some ways that you can try to get rid of old clothing you don't want anymore if you're trying to declutter or you know, clean out your old clothing without necessarily just throwing them into a landfill. And again, those options are really expanding over the next few years, so hopefully the options for that will just continue to grow. So thank you for watching day 10 of the What's the Stitch campaign. I will talk to you all tomorrow. Bye!